Well, good morning and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to a very cold Norfolk, where I'm here just on the edge of Great Yarmouth. This is Breydon Bridge just behind me, and I'm on the edge of Breydon Water, which is an RSPB nature reserve that actually covers 1,271 acres. It is enormous and it is very important for overwintering wildfowl. And in fact, just across the main channel here, I can see thousands and thousands of widgeon, and I believe there's also some lapwing, and I can hear the odd redshank flying through as well. Absolutely gorgeous. Now the tide is out, you can see it's running towards the sea over here. So I'm here to begin a brand new long distance walk that begins at the train station in Yarmouth, just the other side of the bridge over there. It's called the Angles Way, and it is 92 miles that ends in the town of Thetford. That follows a vast section of the Broads National Park all the way down through Beccles and Monkey, and then it crosses the open countryside past Diss and then ends in Thetford. So I've arrived at the end of Breydon Water, and I'm about 6 kilometres in, and the water here narrows to a point and then splits in two, with the left one being the River Waveney and the right hand fork being the River Yare. And it's just round the corner that I'm going to have a little look at Borough Castle Roman Fort. So I've taken a little detour off the path to visit this lovely Roman fort here at Borough Castle. And as you can see, there are extensive wall remains all the way around. Now, it actually covers just 3 sides of the original Roman forts. The south side, that's the eastern side, and the northern side. And you can see on this western edge here, it's actually collapsed a lot now due to erosion. Half of the fort sadly is now missing, but this fort originally was built around 260 or 280 AD, so somewhere towards the end of the 3rd century. And it's one of numerous shore forts along the Norfolk coast, including one over at Brancaster and also at Caister-on-Sea, just a few miles up the road. And after the Roman Empire fell, the site was actually used as an early Christian monastery. And then later on, in the early Norman period, somewhere around the late 11th century, or perhaps early 12th century, they built a castle here. And actually, if you see, there's a slight dip in the ground around this southern corner here. And this is actually the site of the motte. And this would have been considerably higher with an enormous ditch around it. And they actually reused the Roman walls as defences. Why not? They're here in the first place anyway. And these also stand at their original height of about 5 metres, and you can actually see some of the corner turrets still in really good condition as well. Now, of course, this whole area is protected as a scheduled ancient monument, and there's also a lovely view looking west across the marshes over to Burney Mill. So I've just left the village of Belton behind me, and I'm on this footpath that's going to lead me to Redwings Animal Sanctuary. Now, just through the trees over here, there is a little historic treat. That is a Bronze Age burial mound that dates all the way back to about 2000 BC. And it has the name of Mill Hill because at some point in the past, they actually built a mill on the top. So this beautiful building here is the Grade 2 star listed Church of St Edmund, and it dates all the way back to the 12th century. Although this gorgeous round tower here, the base of it could be Saxo-Norman, so somewhere around the mid 11th or perhaps late 11th century. Now inside there is an area known as the sanctuary, and there are some gorgeous 12th century wall paintings of animals and figures. I'm going to have a look and see if the church is open, but I think it might be locked this time of the day. So I'm now entering the tiny village of Fritton, and that's where I'm going to be finishing this part of the walk. I've done about 15 kilometres today, and then the next part is going to take me from here all the way into the bustling hub of Oulton Broad. And I do have an option to catch a bus from here all the way into Great Yarmouth for an overnight stay. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, and also ring the bell to keep up to date with future uploads, and I'll see you in the next part. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to the Angles Way, where I'm on day 2 of this lovely trail which has just left the tiny village of Fritton, which sits just the other side of these trees over there, and it's going to end at Oulton Broad, and it's about 15 or 16 kilometres, and my main stop in the middle is going to be the small village of Somerleyton, where I'll actually get down to the river again, which is really nice as most of this section actually hugs the edge of the Waveney Valley. So I've just arrived here at the Church of St Mary in Ashby, and this is a lovely Grade 1 listed building that dates to the medieval period. Now the nave over here is 13th century, and at the back is a chancel which is late 13th century, but let's take a little look at this tower because it's unusual in the sense that it's got a lower third that's round, but the top is octagonal. Now this is a 16th century rebuild, but let's take a look at the base down here. If you look at this line of stonework down here, it's believed that this is Saxon. Now Somerleyton really is a beautiful little village, and there is a village pub if you want to grab some refreshments, as there's no other places to stop until I get over to Oulton Broad. Now this next section is going to take me through the marshes, and hopefully I'm going to spot some of the local wildlife. So this gorgeous Grade 1 listed building is the Church of St Meindl in Oulton, and as you can tell it's a very rare cruciform style building with the tower in the centre. It's actually just off centre, and it would have had a south aisle here and one on the other side as well, the north aisle, so the tower actually sits at the point of the cross. So the church actually dates all the way back to the 12th century, and there are a few elements that still remain from that time, including the base of this gorgeous central tower, which you can see has been rebuilt at a later time, probably 16th or 17th century, with all the brickwork. And also the nave here, this is 12th century as well, and again this was rebuilt in the 14th century with all the brickwork on the higher sections. Now inside, sadly the church is locked, but inside there are a few beautiful Norman arches as well, with some gorgeous chevron and zigzag patterns, but say sadly the church is closed today. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to the Anglesway, where I'm on part 3 of this lovely walk. Now I've just left Oulton Broad behind me, and today is about 8.5 miles all the way to Beccles. Now I'm just crossing these fields at the moment over towards Carlton Marshes. That's the first kind of landmark on this section. It's a Suffolk Wildlife Trust Reserve, and I'm going to stop there for a little bit to kind of see what wildlife I can see. And then shortly after that I'll join the River Waveney, and that is followed all the way into Beccles. So I'm right in the centre of Carlton Marshes here, and the reserve itself is 1,000 acres, and it sits right on the edge of the River Waveney and within the Broads National Park boundary. And there is a brand new visitor centre on the far side over there, and there is a coffee shop, and it's gorgeous. And from here, I'm actually sat in the middle of the reserve on a slight mound or flood bank, so I can actually overlook all of the marshes. It's very flat, so when you're down on the lower footpaths, you can only see kind of what's alongside. But from these viewpoints, you can see much, much further. There's a few hides on the far side over there. Some birds down here, I can't quite see what they are. There's a few swans about. And then also over here, there are some Canada geese, and on the board there was a report of a firecrest and also great white egret and cattle egret. So I'm certainly going to look out for those when we make our way down to the river. So this building behind me here is Castle Drainage Mill, and it was actually an old tower mill that was first recorded in 1837, but it was later replaced by this engine in 1883. So we are just over 11 kilometres into the walk today, and we've passed Cove Staithe and also Whirlingham Staithe and Whirlingham Marshes. The line of trees just over here actually marks the edge of that marsh, but we've actually just entered Beccles Marsh, and if I rotate you around, you can see the vast expanse of the marsh here. Is probably the largest of the marshes that we've actually walked alongside, and it's probably another 3 kilometres at least as we make our way along the river round to the Staithe. And this river here, the Waveney, has been in our company for the whole of today almost. So we're deep into Beccles Marsh now, and I've just come across a hint of an industrial past, and that is this railway viaduct here. So you can see a couple of platforms, and there's more that actually go out into the river, which I'll show you in a moment. But this line once linked Beccles with St Olaves and then up onto Great Yarmouth as well. So we're just coming towards the end of the walk and managed to grab ourselves an ice cream just at Beccles Staithe. There's a little cafe there, was open. So if you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, and also ring the bell to keep up to date with future uploads. And I'll see you in the next part. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to the Angles Way, where I'm on day 4 of this lovely trail. I've just left the town of Beccles. It sits about half a mile or so behind me, just along a couple of roads, and I'm going to be doing about 11 miles today. That's going to take me all the way to the other side of Bungay. Now it's about 7.5 miles to the town, and it sits just to the west, but I'm going to head around that and end in the village of Earsham. Now just across the fields over here is a pub called the Locks Inn, and it's actually in the village of Gelderston, just the other side of the River Waveney, and it's the point of, or the limit of navigation for any motor cruisers on the Broads National Park. So this lovely historic church here in Ships Meadow is a Grade 2 star listed building, and it's dedicated to St Bartholomew, and it dates mostly to the medieval period, although this area here, the nave, the main fabric of that is actually 12th century, and it actually has one of the original windows over here, and there's a much later early 16th century tower, and then they believe that the chancel at the back probably was built around the 14th century but largely rebuilt in the Victorian period. Now just across this field there's an enormous H-shaped building, and this is actually an 18th century workhouse. It dates to about 1766, 1767 and is Grade 2 listed. But what's more important is that this is potentially the most complete 18th century large workhouse in the entire country. So I've taken a little detour just off the trail to come and have a look at this stunning ruin here. This is Mettingham Castle, and it's actually the remains of a fortified manor house. Now, there was permission granted to crenellate this house in 1342, but then in 1382 it was actually given over to a college and became a monastic college, and apparently there's still some remains over at the back. Now it's all on private land, unfortunately. Now you can only see it from the road here, but there are select days where the ruins are open to the public. So I'm on this final sort of 5 kilometre curving path that takes me round Outney Common over towards Earsham, and it sits on this escarpment really. It drops away quite steeply down to the river on my left, and I'm at about 30 metres above sea level here, which at one point in the past used to be the highest point in the national park, the Broads, and that now goes to Strumpshaw Hill at 40 metres, so a little bit higher. And then when I actually get round to Earsham, it will be the point where I leave the Broads National Park and then start heading towards the Brecks. So I'm only a couple of minutes away from Earsham now, and I can hear the rumble of the A143, I think it is, just a few hundred metres ahead. If you've enjoyed this part of the walk, please hit like, hit subscribe, and also ring the bell to keep up to date with future uploads, and I'll see you in part 5. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to the Angles Way, where I'm on day 5 of this trail that starts in Earsham, and it's about 17 kilometres over to Harleston. And I'm starting here just by the church in Earsham. This is the Grade 1 listed Church of St Mary. Now this is probably Norman. In fact, the nave they think has been enlarged at some point, and also the chancel here has been dated to about 1300. And for Norfolk, it's actually really rare to have a spire on top of the tower, so it's quite an uncommon building for this county. So as I said, today's route is about 17 kilometres, and it's going to take me through the tiny village of Holmesfield and Meindl before heading down into Harleston. So we climbed up this steep hill out of Earsham. We've ended up at this incredibly flat field here to my right. And if you look, I'm actually walking on a concrete track. And I think this is an original track from RAF Earsham, which was first recorded in 1915. So sadly, I don't think anything actually remains other than these trackways from the original airfield. But from the air, you can certainly get an idea of the layout. So just behind me over here is Chestnut Tree Farmhouse, and it's a Grade 2 listed timber framed house that dates back to the early 17th century, so it's nearly 400 years old. And it's here I'm actually joining this track that's going to lead me down towards a couple of lakes, where I'm going to turn left in towards Holmesfield. I'm actually heading back down into the Waveney Valley now, where the last 8.5 kilometres have all been right on the edge and up in the field, so it's going to be nice to get back down towards the river. So we've just arrived in the gorgeous little village of Holmesfield, and there is actually a village pub just by the green if you wanted some refreshments. But this here is the Grade 2 star listed Church of St Mary, and it dates back to the 12th century. And in fact, there is a small Norman window just on the south side, I think, of the nave. We'll go around and have a look in just a moment, which is probably the oldest part of this building that still remains. So it's certainly about 900 years old. So this end here, this is the chancel, and that is a 14th century window, and this was extensively restored in the late 19th century. But I'm going to go have a little look inside. So we've arrived in the village of Meindl, and just like Holmesfield, there is a pub, actually it's a hotel, so you can stay there overnight if you want to. Now this is the Grade 1 listed Church of All Saints in Meindl, and the tower over here, that's 14th century. The main building, the main fabric, dates back to the medieval period, and just at this end, the chancel, that was rebuilt in 1880. And the site itself is more historic than that, because it's believed this is the site of an Anglo-Saxon minster church, so one of the most important churches in the region during Anglo-Saxon times. So once we've stopped here for a little bit, we're going to have something to eat, and then we've got the last few kilometres over to Harleston. So we're just coming into the town of Harleston now, and I've probably got about sort of 700 or 800 metres until the end of this part of the walk. So if you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe and ring the bell to keep up to date with future uploads, and I'll see you next time. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to the Angles Way, where I'm on part 6 of this trail. And I've just left the town of Harleston behind. Now it's about a mile or so along a few footpaths and roads just behind me, and today's section is going to end just the other side of Dis, and it's about 23 kilometres. We're having a bit of a heat wave today. It's going to hit about 24, maybe even up to 26 degrees. So we've started really early. It's about, I don't know, 20 past 8 or so in the morning. So hopefully we can get most of the route done before the heat really starts to kick in. We're going to head through the tiny village of Brecks. It's got a gorgeous Saxon church there. And then we're going to head around Skull. There's, I think, a ruined church. We're going to see quite a lot of history actually on this section, more so today than we've had done on previous days, I think. So it's going to be really, really quite interesting. Although I think the first 6 to 8 kilometres is going through agricultural fields, or grazing fields I should say actually. So there's a high risk of cows on this section, which I am not looking forward to. So we are about 10 kilometres in and we've arrived here at the village of Brecks, which is a slightly unusual name for a village, but apparently it's Anglo-Saxon and it actually means the enclosure down by the brook. So I'm here at the Church of St Peter and St Paul, this Grade 1 listed building in Brecks. Actually, if you look at the top, there is a sparrowhawk just flying over. How fantastic. And the north wall of the nave is dated to the mid or early 11th century. And there's a possible Saxon window there as well. And then the north wall of the chancel is also Norman with some Norman windows and dates back to the sort of mid 12th century. Now we're going to stop here and have some lunch and then I'm going to have a little look inside the church and then we are heading over towards Dis. So here I am on the north side of the chancel and here is one of the Norman windows and the other one as well. Absolutely beautiful, very narrow slits, making it very dark inside the church when sermons and prayer was actually going on inside back in Norman times. And I've just spotted what is the outside, I think, of the Saxon window. So just here, now the buttress is much, much later, as is the top courses of the nave here, but it looks like they've built just a little outside window with a small tunnel just going through. So I'm guessing the even spaces of the buttress are what was needed for the nave, just lined up with that window, and they've put this little section in. But the bottom courses of the nave here, you can see it's made of this coarse rubble. Now these are the oldest surviving parts of the church as well, and these are dated to the 11th century. And the guidebook inside does say that it dates to around the Norman conquest. It's very, very hard to pinpoint exactly, but the window certainly looks Saxon. So we're about 14.5 sort of kilometres into today, and just here is the stile. It doesn't look like much, but this is actually officially the start point for the Mid-Suffolk footpath, which is a 20-mile waymarked route that goes all the way from here down to Stowmarket. But from here, we're not going that way. We are going to continue along these field edges. It's going to take us round towards a little church, which is just off the trail. We'll have a little look at that. We're going to pass another ruined church, and then up towards Friends, which there's another church as well, so we've got a few landmarks as we go, and then down into Dis. We've probably still got about 6 miles to go. Unfortunately, it is incredibly hot. I think we're probably hitting 23 or 24 degrees at the moment, and the breeze is actually really welcome. But yeah, maybe 10 kilometres, 6 miles, somewhere around that, and we should be done. So we are just on the edge of the village of Billingford, and if you can see past all of these cows over here, there is actually a little dovecot, and that's a Grade 2 listed building, and it dates back to the 18th century, so it's a few hundred years old. And I'm so glad I haven't got to walk through that field, because those cows are not happy that we are here. Even though there's a fence and barbed wire between us, I'm a little nervous. But anyway, we're heading on a little tiny detour at the moment, actually. So we're on the Anglesway at the moment, but we're going to head down a trackway over to the parish church just over there. So we've taken a little detour over to the Grade 1 listed Church of St Leonard here in Billingford, and it dates back to about the 14th and 15th century, although some elements could be a little bit older. And what's really strange is that the actual tower doesn't look like it was ever finished. There's a little roof just plonked on top. So we've made it just up the hill to have a look at the ruins of St Mary's Church just on the corner of this field. And they are Grade 2 listed, but they actually date back to the 12th century, so they're 800 or even 900 years old. And it's only 2 parts of the round tower actually remain. And it was the parish church of the village of Thorpe Parva, which I think is actually a deserted medieval village now, because only the ruined church remains with a couple of other buildings and the hall. So we are 22 kilometres into the walk today, and we've just arrived here at Friends Church, and that's spelled F-R-E-N-Z-E, so a very unusual name. And this is the Church of St Andrew. It's a Grade 1 listed building, and it dates back to primarily the 14th century, but there are, I think, some 13th century elements. And it consists of just the nave. At one point there was a chancel at this end, but that was demolished and the wall was rebuilt, and the chancel window was placed on the east end of the nave here. There is no tower, but there is a little Tudor entrance here. And then on the other side of the track, that's Friends Hall over there. So we've got about 2.5, perhaps 3 kilometres or so into Dis now. So we're just on this final little stretch of today. So we're just coming into Dis now, and I'm only about 200 metres from the town centre. I'm going to have a quick look at the Grade 1 listed Church of St Mary, which dates back to the 14th century, and then I'm going to head past Dis Mere, and then I'm parked just the other side. So if you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, and also ring the bell to keep up to date with future uploads, and I'll see you in the next part. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to the Angles Way, where I'm on day 7 of this trail, which I think is going to be about 23 kilometres. Now, I have just left the town of Dis, and I'm actually straight into the marshes of the Waveney Valley. I think the river sits just over there somewhere. I'm actually just into Norfolk at the moment, so the Suffolk border is the river. So I think what the trees I can see on the far side probably are in Suffolk. And today is going to end at Knettishall Heath. Now, just the one thing to note, there is no accommodation and there's no public transport at Knettishall Heath. So it's either going to be a wild camp, or you're going to have to get a taxi into Thetford so you can actually stay overnight somewhere. And I'm actually just coming up to a medieval moat, which was the site of Bush Hall. And there were excavations in the past which showed medieval pottery, but also they were re-identified to be some elements of Roman pottery as well. So there is a big Roman settlement about 5 miles or so behind me, and the likelihood is that a Roman road going through here in some direction. So this section is going to take me through several nature reserves, including the large reserve of Redgrave and Lopham, which is owned and managed by Suffolk Wildlife Trust. And there's also quite a lot of history, including a Norman tower and multiple medieval churches as well. So we have now arrived here at the Grade 1 listed church of St Mary the Virgin, just north of Wortham. And the main body of the church, the chancel and the nave, they date to about the 14th century. But what's really unique about this building is the tower just over here, this enormous round tower, which is dated to the 12th or possibly late 11th century. And what's even more special about this three-stage tower is it has a diameter of 29 feet and a height of 62 feet, making this the largest Norman round tower in the entire country. And some of the lower courses of stonework appear to have a herringbone style construction, which is a very early style of stonework. So we have entered Redgrave and Lopham Fen, which is an enormous nature reserve that is owned and managed by Suffolk Wildlife Trust. It actually covers about 432 acres, and it is the largest valley fen in the entire country, and it's home to some very rare species, including the raft spider. I know they exist just on the far side of the fen. And I've joined the River Waveney again. It's actually just next to me here amongst all the reeds. It's pretty much just a ditch at this point, and I think about 2 more kilometres further up we'll actually go close to the source of the River Waveney. So we're about 13 kilometres in today, and we've just entered Hinderclay Fen, and it's another valley fen, but this one is actually in the Little Ouse Valley, because just back over there, maybe half a mile, there is the source of the River Waveney on one side of the road, and then literally on the other side of the road is the source of the Little Ouse. And that bridge is actually quite important because that's the only actual land connecting Suffolk with Norfolk. All other places you have to cross over a bridge, and that is the only place that connects the two counties. Now I'm actually going to be sticking to the Little Ouse Valley all the way into Thetford. we have just left Thelneatham Fen, and just across the field over here there is a tower mill, and that's Thelneatham Mill, and it's a Grade 2 star listed building that dates back to 1819. In fact, there is a record that says that work began on Christmas Day 1819. So we have arrived here at the village of Hopton, and this is the Grade 1 listed church of All Saints that dates back to the late 13th century. And in the village there is a shop where you can get some refreshments. This is one of the first shops I think I've encountered for quite some time, and there is also a village pub as well. So we are just entering the tiny hamlet of Gasthorpe now, and it really only consists of a couple of houses and farms, but if you look across the field over there, that is the ruins of St Nicholas Church, which was the parish church for the village, and it dates back to the medieval period, and they're protected as Grade 2 listed building. But it was in 1719 that the tower itself actually collapsed, and of course the building is now out of use. So we've just arrived here at Riddlesworth, and this is the Grade 2 star listed church of St Peter, and it's got a really interesting arch just into the tower, and sadly it's locked so we can't have a little look inside. But next door there is an amazing building with some very interesting history. So this here is Riddlesworth Hall, and it was actually recently used as a boarding school but closed in April 2023. But it was finished about 1793, and it's a Grade 2 listed building. But having a hall of such grandeur in close proximity to the church implies that there was probably an older medieval hall on the site that would have been demolished and then rebuilt into this grand house. Now, another interesting fact about this building is that this is where Princess Diana went to school when she was a child. So I'm edging ever closer to Knettishall Heath, and it's only a few hundred metres further up, and I can tell that the landscape around me is beginning to change. These lush green fields will soon die out into a more acidic soil, and these lush green trees will turn into Scots pine, where I've entered the Breckland landscape. And that will be my final day in towards Thetford, but for now I'm heading towards the nature reserve. I think today has been a real highlight. I was not expecting to see the hall where Princess Diana went to school. I was not expecting to see that, and the churches and the ruins that I've seen today have been really, really interesting. If you've enjoyed this part of the walk, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, and also ring the bell to keep up to date with future uploads, and I'll see you in the final part. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to the Angles Way, where I'm on the final day of this trail now. And I'm in Knettishall Heath National Nature Reserve. It's owned and managed by Suffolk Wildlife Trust, and I'm following the Little Ouse River. It's just alongside me here, and there's actually a lovely viewing platform just slightly further back, and you can see loads of fish all swimming in the water. And I've been here quite a few times in the past, and there's an enormous tree that's come down recently. The whole thing pretty much has been split in half. Look at that over there. That's pretty cool. Anyway, today is going to be quite a long day. It's around 25 kilometres. Now, normally we were thinking of finishing this the previous day just at the car park at the other end of Knettishall Heath. We actually finished it at this end, so there's an extra sort of mile to do really to get round to that section. So yeah, it's going to be around 16, I think, miles, 15, 16 miles. And pretty much all of it is away from any form of village or settlement. So we're going to be heading onto sort of very straight trackways around the south side of Thetford, going around Barnham, and then we're going to pick up the Icknield Way, which is an ancient trackway, potentially one of the oldest trackways in the entire country, and that is going to lead us in towards Thetford. So as I say, about 25 kilometres. The weather is just going to be overcast all day, this kind of dreary kind of grey cloud, but at least it's not going to rain, or it's not forecast to rain. And we keep hearing the jets setting off from RAF Lakenheath or Meindl, so we might see some jets flying over as well. So I've reached a little bit of a landmark, which is this sign here, and this is a crossroads of many long distance trails, including the National Trail of the Peddars Way, which goes up towards the Norfolk coast path and then along the Norfolk coast. So it's 74 kilometres or 46 miles all the way to home next to the sea. And this is the original end of the Angles Way as well. This is where it would have finished historically, which is why it says 77 miles to Great Yarmouth. But the Angles Way link path, which is the bit that I'm going to be doing today, is actually considered part of the trail now. It wasn't historically, but it is now. So yeah, they just haven't taken this down or changed it. There's no point. And there you go, continuation of the Angles Way. Thetford 15 miles from here. So we've done about a mile from hour start over the other car park in Knettishall Heath. So yeah, I'm going to guess 16 miles today. And then it's also the end of the Icknield Way, or one part of it. So one part actually ends in Thetford and the other part ends here. So Ivinghoe Beacon is 105 miles, and that is also the end of the National Trail of the Ridgeway. So interestingly, next to that sign is also an information board of the Great Chalk Ridge, which basically shows that there is a waymarked trail all the way from Dorset up the Wessex Ridgeway, along the Ridgeway National Trail, along the Icknield Way, and all the way along the Peddars Way up to the top of the Norfolk coast, which has got to be about 300 or 400 mile long trail right across England. Well, this here is the first trig point, I think, of the entire route. And just looking at the map, it's 49 metres above sea level, which is not actually the highest point on this very slight hill. I think it's 53 metres, probably about half a kilometre or so to the southwest, but trig point it is. We're actually now going to head down this very long avenue of trees over towards Euston Hall. So we have just left the village of Euston, and I was really hoping to get a view of Euston Hall. And it's a Grade 2 star listed building. It dates back to 1660, but the core of it is older than that. But sadly, all the trees blocked the views. I could see one window and one corner of a roof only. So yeah, really sad. Hopefully, if you ever do this bit in winter, you'll actually be able to see the house. It is a gorgeous, stately home, and it is open, I think, to the public on certain days. Yeah, it's worth having a look at their website if you're interested in seeing that. And there is a nearby church as well. We didn't want to head all the way over there because, say, we're doing like 16 miles today, and it would have added on an extra mile just to get there and back. So we didn't go over to the church either. So we're currently on a trackway that's going to head over towards the main road that links Bury and Thetford. So I think it's about 3 kilometres along here, and then we will just pop out on the main road. So we have just joined the original line of the Icknield Way, which is one of Britain's oldest trackways. It's known to be at least 5,000 years old. And it's also part of the St Edmund Way, which is another long distance trail, one that I did create a film for a couple of years ago, so I'll pop a little link in the description below for that. Now we're going to follow this trail, this part of the Icknield Way, all the way into Thetford now, so I reckon we've probably got about 6 kilometres left. So we're still on the original line of the Icknield Way, and I'm just passing beside Norfolk Wildlife Trust Thetford Heath, which is a national nature reserve, and it's this enormous field over to my right here. Now, it might not look like much, but actually there are only a few pockets of proper heathland left within the Brecks, and this is one of the best preserved. Now, not only is it just a nature reserve, but on the other side, just over there, you can't make out any of the buildings at the moment, but there's a scheduled ancient monument over there, but one that isn't actually ancient. It's actually a nuclear bunker, and I'm pretty sure it was built to house the first nuclear weapons that were built in Great Britain. So we have finally entered Barnham Cross Common, and it's the final few hundred metres left of the trail, because at the far side there is a sign that says Angles Way, pointing the opposite direction towards Great Yarmouth, of 96 miles. So we're almost at the end of the walk, and we've been going for probably about 6 hours 45 minutes or so today. Now, if you have enjoyed this entire series, definitely hit like, hit subscribe and ring the bell to keep up to date with future uploads, and I'll see you next time.